Hi and welcome back to another video. Sorry I haven't really been the most consistent in uploading videos, but there's just been so many changes in my life lately, and I just haven't really been in the proper state to kind of sit down and film videos. And yeah, my reading has been a little bit haphazard. I think I've just been branching out to so many different things that I am kind of struggling to catch up as well with the bigger themes in my life right now. So for now, I'm obviously kind of prioritizing my own personal life and the things in it, but I still want to dedicate some time to this channel. So just to clear it out of the way, I will be posting just once a week from now on. I think this is kind of like a good compromise on being able to dedicate time to the things that I'm working on outside of this channel, but also still stay committed to the channel and to continue making content that I feel strongly about, and having a reading journal as a reading journey that's still quite authentic to me. In this video, I'm gonna be talking about something that's not new. I don't think it's something that it's not an idea that I came up with myself. This has been said by several other booktubers in this general booktube scene, and I want to kind of add to the conversation and to also amplify the things that the other booktubers have said. And this is about US centrism in the booktube community, but also at large, anything that's got to do with culture, anything that's got to do with general knowledge, etc. And I want to kind of shout out to this booktuber called Meta Narrator, who really brought up so many good points about how booktube is a place where a lot of assumptions kind of fly over our heads and we don't address them. And in addition to that, this other channel called Books on My Social Life is another inspiration for me in making this video. So what exactly am I going to address in this video? I don't really have like clear points. I kind of just wanted to sit down and chat about it and to come up with my own personal experiences, reading as well. I think just to give some background, I am from Singapore, so I've been born and raised here. I went through the education system here in Singapore as well, and I took literature when I was from when I was preteen to teenager years. I took it at national exams for the O-levels and A-levels, which follows the British national exam format. And because we follow the British exam format, the literature that we had to read was British, or at least they were classics that were defined as classics according to British context and British like background. So for example, I had to read Shakespeare plays. I also had to read novels. I mean, they were not UK authors per se, but these were classics that were kind of just given to us without explaining, without even complementing it with classics that were from our own context, Asian authors or Singaporean authors or Southeast Asian authors. I never had any of those kind of experiences when I was studying literature in school. Once in a while we would study local poetry, but the chances of local poetry actually coming out in the exam wasn't very high. So from a very kind of pragmatic point of view, there's not much incentive to read local literature, and we were not taught how to analyze local literature, and so I grew up having to imagine myself in this like countryside setting, with Victorian morals, Victorian context. How would this young woman be feeling in this setting back in the day when she had to think about marriage and when she had to navigate these moral codes of conduct in historical Britain? And it was so normal then. No one really questioned it. it was just right because the classics, they're all from this context. They're all, we learn about the great American dream, but we're not American. But we sort of never questioned why we had to be interested in it, or why we had to really understand the sentiments of a post-war America. Like, it was just common sense. And I never really understood that until like college years, when people were talking about post-colonial movements. People were talking about the kind of like soft power of the US, and the soft power, the kind of like post-imperial mindset of a lot of the I guess like colonizer countries in today's context. These things were not taught to me, and they were only made salient to me much later on in my life. And I would want to say that as much as I have been much more interested in local literature and regional kind of literature in the past few months, I cannot escape the fact that by and large the international community online is still very much in that world where it revolves around American context, or the UK context, or revolves around the kind of global north context, that their experiences are things that we kind of have to imagine and embody and be able to conform to. Not as in, it's possible to be involved in your own little thing in this side of the world, but if you do want to have some kind of international credit, you must be able to understand the global north sensibility and be able to talk to it, be able to sell to it, be able to grapple with it, and to be palatable to it, I think, by and large. And I feel that a lot on the booktube community. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that you shouldn't be reading a lot of these amazing works by authors who happen to be from the global north. I, for one, have really greatly benefited from reading the works of feminist theory thinkers, especially the Black feminists who wrote against kind of this universal white feminism. I learned so much from reading that whole canon of works, like being able to read from all these authors and to learn from their experiences. And that really shaped a lot of my own political beliefs. And I wouldn't want to, and also in addition to that, like queer theorists from the US have been super instrumental in the way that I see myself. And that is all fine and dandy, but I think that it's also important to recognize that these universal truths are sometimes not universal, and that it's okay to dig deeper into what makes us all the same. But I think if you do kind of understand into the intersectionality, you understand that it's the differences that make us strong, that make us interesting and unique, and that it's the differences that we have to amplify and to strengthen, and not find universals that are the same for everyone. And I would want to say also, for someone who might be from a position of privilege here in Singapore, I understand that for myself, I commit myself to be able to amplify voices that are a bit more marginalized than mine, and that is my obligation to do so. So I did read some comments of booktubers in the booktube videos that I mentioned earlier, and some of them commented that maybe they were just not aware that they were racist, that obviously from their position reading the book, they just felt that it was a pleasant read. They felt that the only critique they could have was maybe the techniques that the writer used or did not use, whereas people of color or like queer people might read the book and find it racist or homophobic, and that it is not wrong per se if you are a straight white person, that you then pick up these nuances in the books. That's fine. I think that's completely valid. I think what can be done is that we would then deliberately search for voices that are different from ours to kind of figure out, are there things that are really, so obvious to other people that are not obvious to us, and does this obvious difference harm other people? I think it's fine to have different perspectives on literature and on books, but I think that when the difference in opinion and difference in perspective actually harms another person's sense of self, I think that's when you have to take a step back and question whether is it really okay to have such a difference and to have their voice sort of erased, and your voice is maybe someone who is in a better position than this person, for your voice to be taken more seriously and to be taken as the legitimate opinion over someone else's kind of perspective. And I think that this is kind of just my own take on it, that reading should be fun, it should be enjoyable, it should be pleasurable, but it also is somewhat political. And I'm not saying that you have to be extremely nitpicky and you have to cover all ground before you read a book. I think it's just about acknowledging the nuance that comes behind it, and if we make a mistake, we just apologize and take accountability. I think it's just kind of simple like that, because I don't believe in blaming people for not picking up things that they were not socialized to pick up on. For example, like me, as being socialized as a woman, I don't necessarily blame men for not realizing when a comment is sexist, but I will take it seriously, if a man is kind of informed that the comment is sexist and then proceeds to disregard that information. I think that is the area that is the aspect that I would not understand. I want to be very clear on this channel that whatever I read and whatever I will review and share will definitely be from the perspective of someone who grew up in Singapore and someone who is actively trying to resist this US or this global North-centric perspective. Because I, for one, never grew up watching American shows. I, for one, did not grow up listening to One Direction music. I, for one, I did not rely on the kind of imported culture to gain a sense of self. But I cannot deny that by virtue of me speaking English, by virtue of me having to read literature from the UK in my formative years, the fact that all my theories I had to study in college were derived largely from a US context, I cannot deny that. And I cannot deny the fact that yes, a lot of my upbringing has been shaped by this weird position of me being in Singapore, this very cosmopolitan city with English as its first language, and kind of positioning itself very closely to global North countries, and yet being in Southeast Asia, having the cultural heritage of the region, having this knowledge kind of just erased and made invisible, the histories of Singapore that we might not learn about. Instead, we had to learn about the histories of other countries. We had to learn the histories of Europe in our exams. We did not learn as much about the histories of our neighbours. And this is a very serious reflection, I guess, looking back on my life, and I just wanted to take the opportunity to address it in the larger booktube community, because I think that there's incredible power in being able to recognize what are the spots that you are missing and to amplify the voices of the people who can represent those gaps. So I will be linking a few channels in my description box below of people that I think you should sincerely check out. I am also trying to find more booktubers who do multilingual content. If you know any, please do recommend them to me. I really want to be able to be more surrounded and be more exposed to Asian booktubers, and I don't mean Asian diasporic booktubers, although yes, your experiences are valid, but I would not be able to relate to your experiences growing up in New York, in LA, in whatever place. I can only really relate to a young woman who grew up in Singapore, in Malaysia, in the Philippines, in any sort of country that's nearer to mine. The food that we eat, the shows that we watch, the kind of cultural norms that we have. I just have no way to relate to this bestseller book that's about a young woman growing up in I don't know, like 1980s Texas. Like I just cannot, and I will not be reading those books if I cannot see myself in them, if you kind of get where I'm coming from. So sorry this is such a long rant, but I've just been thinking about this for the past few months, because like being online, it's very easy to get sucked into what's popular, and it's honestly quite heartbreaking to see all these bestsellers and to see the local community kind of reading these books and having to stretch our imagination to resonate and to review these books positively. And like I mentioned, there's nothing wrong with reading classics. I think there's nothing wrong with reading a perfectly well written book that's set in the US. Some of these stories are great and I resonate deeply with some of them, but I shouldn't feel restrained by that choice. I shouldn't have to look at book lists and to see that basically 90 out of 100, which is just 9 out of 10. I shouldn't have to see that 9 out of 10 books, are based in the US and nowhere else. But I also know that this is a limitation of English being the primary language that I read in, and also I would like to challenge myself to read in other languages if I can. That would include Chinese, Malay, Korean. Yeah, and I would just have to push myself that way, because all my life I've been growing up on literature that is just so far removed from me, and I was told to have to read them. Okay, so this kind of concludes my really long rant on this topic. I know that I wasn't really making very clear points, but I do hope that some of the things I've mentioned make sense to you. And if they don't, or you think that I'm not really addressing any sort of issue properly, you can comment down below and let me know what you think. I think it's a great privilege for me to be able to speak in such clear English and to communicate to the international community. This is really because of my upbringing, being able to kind of like engage with all these works at a higher level. It's sometimes, I think this is something that I read in post-colonial works by I think like Frantz Fanon or something, about how they detest being only able to express themselves intellectually in their colonial language. And I feel very much the same towards English, and I'm very much a product of my education here, which prioritizes proper English, British English. I don't want it to be I think this video sounds a bit depressing or a bit negative, but I really do think the booktube community can do better. I do think that there is a lot of potential in booktubers who are not based in the global north. I really do think that the booktube community can afford to uplift these channels a lot more. Because I know that diversity is like a huge buzzword right now in any sort of community, and especially in the US. And I think that, after so many years of basically, American cultural rule, I think that picking up a book from some country that, you never thought you would read an original work from might be a great start. Because I had to do that all the time growing up, so it might be nice to see a mutual exchange in some senses. And you might be surprised to find stories that, you know, resonate deeply with you as well, from authors you thought you would never find parallel experiences with. So yeah, that's the end of my video. Thanks for staying all the way if you did. Sorry for this really this really long ramble, and thanks so much for staying with me on this channel. I think it really means a lot to me, and I really hope to be able to bring my own unique perspective as well to this community. Yeah, so cool. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.